46 years ago, we witnessed the birth of hip hop music and culture. Now, since its early days, the infectious energy of hip hop has driven its global spread. It's now the country's most popular music form. But has hip hop gone as far as it's going to go? Correspondent Khalil Ekulona put together a panel of hip hop experts to discuss what's next.
Here today, we are talking about hip hop music and culture, its impact across the globe, in America, and here in New Mexico. With me today, joining me, we have Ebony Isis Booth, poet, musician, activist, and educator. We've got Frank Willis, co-founder of Famous Hip Hop Radio, producer, promoter, and restaurateur. And we've got Roscoe DJ Flo Fader Floyd. He is a DJ, producer, and educator. Thank you all for being here with me today.
Thank you.
So let's talk about it. And for transparency, I also am a hip hop musician and creator. So I want this to be an open conversation about hip hop, how we feel about it. So since its creation, hip hop music and culture, it's really impacted our society and globe in general. What do you see its significance as at this moment and its future? And that question is opened up to anybody who wants to answer.
I think the future, of it is forever, because it's forever evolving. It showed its staying power. It's been here for 40 years, and we still have some of the forefathers and people that kind of started this game are still relevant, and still doing their thing out there, in the community and making records and behind the scenes as well. So I don't see it stopping. I see the longevity of it, just ever evolving, man.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I see it continuously evolving. I see it maybe coming back to its true core, because it's kind of oversaturated with a lot of nonsense today. Although it's still fun, it's just not as edutaining as it used to be back in the day. There's not very much you can learn from it today, although you can still take bits and pieces and find positive perspectives. But I see it starting all over again, going back to its true core.
I think that hip hop has at its foundation, at its root, it's kind of, Earth Mother, right? Mm-hmm. So hip hop is in a feminine form. There's this relationship to creation. It was something that literally sprang up out of the projects from youth voices who needed to seek and find agency. And in that arch over the past 40 years, it's kind of like a birth rebirth cycle, right? So I agree with you in what you're saying, that maybe we're at a point in the growth cycle of hip hop where things that are being born from it are a little, fabricated popcorn, so to speak. And I think that there are those of us who work in education or in production, or the roots still are attached to us. And so we have this responsibility to continue to educate so that we can get into the more meaty, substantial part of the culture, but it's not going anywhere at all.
No, it's permeated the culture of the world, if you ask me.
Absolutely.
And I'm interested in that, because do hip hop artists and creators have a responsibility to be mindful of their message? I mean, a good amount of hip hop right now, popular hip hop, is misogynistic. And in the era of Me Too, that's not really going to stand for a long time. Or is that going to be supported? There's an artist out there that's got a song called Fatiana that's very popular. Mm-hmm. And I'm asking myself, how is that song able to rise in ranks of popularity and go up the charts, so to speak, yet we're in the Me Too movement? That seems like a little bit of a contradiction. And also, they promote alcohol and drug abuse a lot of times in this. Now, should we police that, or should we allow artists to express their vision?
Well, I think that we have to be careful when we use the term about policing anything as it relates to Black culture, right? Because that's problematic.
Especially hip hop.
Especially hip hop, right? I think that it's more important to teach discernment to the people who are listening and imbibing the hip hop, right? So if we're consuming hip hop, we have to be able to take the meat and leave the bones. And so as a woman, as a Black woman, I personally have had so many different complex relationships with hip hop and the misogyny and patriarchy. But like I said, I know that for myself, it's a feminine form, which is why men gravitate toward it in such a way. So, but I had to live through a lot of lessons to learn that and identify that as my truth. In the Me Too movement, I think it's important for us not to, that's kind of a pervasive concept, but for as far as hip hop, we have to be careful not to impose so much negativity on it, because yeah, there's a lot of drug use, but there's also a lot of education and rappers and MCs who are talking about real issues that are real time and contemporary. I think it's kind of a false narrative that imposes this idea around drug use and negativity and all they hate and disrespect women. Some of my favorite songs in hip hop are lifting me up and heralding me, you know what I mean? So, you know, I like Spodio-Delicious, where, you know, I heard Big Boy talking about a black woman in a way that was like admiration, and I was like, I want my partner to talk about me like that. Like, you could just tell that there was so much adoration in that music, and it came from a black man, and it is hip hop, and it was about a black woman, and it did objectify her, but in a very sensual and beautiful way. So it ain't all bad. You just have to be able to discern.
Yeah, I got you.
And you know, I think hip hop wasn't really put here in the first place to be policed, or, you know, it's freedom of speech. It's you know, free to be creative how you want to be. You know what I mean? There's like she said, there's many layers and different artists. It's just some of the ones that are, you know, that we see on television or we hear a lot of times on the radio are the ones that are not necessarily the right message. But I mean, in the beginning, it wasn't the right message either.
That's
so
true.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
that's true.
And it's still going to be that. But there's also going to be, you know, other artists that can, you know, perpetuate a certain sound and a certain message to where it's positive. Well, it's just a lot of times that doesn't get a lot of light for some reason that in this culture, you know, as it did as ours. But we didn't know what we were doing back in the day either. We were just creating upon whatever, you know, was going on in our life or was going on in our situation. And that's where the music budded out from. But, you know, a lot of those guys didn't have a blueprint, you know, of how to do this. We're just, as, you know, our age, nitpicking now because we feel like, oh, you know, we started this. We know what's best for hip hop because we, you know, but we didn't know, you know what I mean? And we still don't because it's growing.
Yeah, we were just like, I remember like the golden age people talk about 1987 to like 1994.
Right.
And there was a lot of beautiful hip hop to come out during that time.
Right.
It was all over the map. 1993, seminally, was probably one of the greatest years in hip hop history. You've got Snoop Dogg releasing his first record. You also have the Insane Clown Posse releasing their first record. Going all the way towards the end of the year, Wu-Tang Clan entering the scene. You had A Tribe Called Quest. And so during then, you could listen to many forms. You can check out the Afrocentric bohemian nature of A Tribe Called Quest.
Right.
And then you can listen to something totally thugged out that was based in...
Be in Compton, Long Beach.
Exactly, you know?
In the projects of whatever, you know what I mean? That's the beauty of hip hop because it has such a broad spectrum and it's so, you know, there's so many things because we, you know, as we say, we live it. We don't, it's not just a thing, you know what I mean? So.
Now, you mentioned something, Frank, about, everybody kind of mentioned it. They were talking about like the hip hop where it's in mainstream society that we hear now. Now, we saw a change. That corporations have definitely noticed hip hop's popularity.
Yeah.
You turn on commercials now, you're hearing either something old school for a Holiday Inn ad, Rob Bass and Easy Rock, or you're hearing the latest instrumental song from what Cardi B had one of the most popular Super Bowl commercials and what have you. So has corporate America's focus and infiltration of hip hop and its marketing affected its message and how it's made?
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
I definitely agree that it has. Only because, for example, the artist Blue, the Tatiana artist, a lot of the major labels are promoting that theme. They're not promoting positive perspective. They're promoting what's going on in the streets, what's going on in the hood, what's going on in the club, or what you think is going on in the streets, what you think is going on in the hood, what you think is going on in the club. Yeah. So I think a lot of the major labels have a lot of influence on what's being put out today, for sure, definitely. And it's not the most positive, but it will change, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's kind of some duality in that, right? So, yeah, Tatiana is this very insanely popular song that essentially is degrading a woman and calling her a derogatory name or pejorative name just based off her sexuality. But in the remixes that have come out subsequently, you have Nicki Minaj and Cardi B in Cardi B's version, I think, is taking back ownership of that that concept or that narrative of the divine feminine being in control of her body and control of her sexuality and control of the microphone and control of the video and control of the money and her image, right? And being able to make that transition as an artist from, you know, a stripper chick on Instagram talking mad reckless to now one of the most successful rappers ever, whether or not she's writing her music, you know what I mean? I do think that corporatization of any art form is dangerous.
Yeah.
But depending on who's controlling whose narrative, you might find some gems in there, right? So there's some truffles to dig for in all the mess that is, you know, a Pepsi commercial.
Just siphon through it.
Yeah.
And hip hop is very regional. You know, it started off East Coast, West Coast. Then we got a little Chicago. Then we got the dirty South and whatnot. One region that hasn't really gotten a lot of shine is the Southwest. And locally, how do you see hip hop's impact? What can be done? How can the Southwest, the artists here from New Mexico, Arizona, and other places, what can they do to make an impact on hip hop, the hip hop world in general?
Well, I think they have already, you know what I mean? Maybe not globally, but, you know, I think they have regionally, and it keeps going. But I say this a lot of times for smaller markets that I've been to. A lot of times, if you don't have artists that are necessarily from here, and when they blow up, they don't rep the city or the, you know, the state where they're from. Like I said, hip hop is real, you know,
It's finicky,
we real finicky about stuff. So, you know, when you listen to somebody's story, it cannot come across to somebody that doesn't know, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we get these artists that, you know, have came from these regions that are blown up. I can name 10 of them right now, you know what I mean? But they don't necessarily represent the region. They just representing their, you know, their art form or their music or whatever it is. And, you know, it's just, I look at a lot of, you know, like new rappers right now. It seems like no matter what happens in California or Los Angeles, there's always the hot rapper that only comes out of Compton.
Yeah.
Which I don't, you know what I mean? I get it, but there's thousands of guys that are, you know, nice in the city. It's just Compton has this stigma. The whole Compton and NWA thing and stuff like that is so, you know, globally big that it doesn't even matter where you're from, you know what I mean? And a lot of artists, they just, you know, if they're good, they're doing it. It's just they don't have a blueprint to look at somebody else that's done it and done it in a major way to say, okay, I'm gonna follow this guy, and then he comes out the same way. When New York, Atlanta, you know, Los Angeles, thousands of artists have came out of these regions, and so people know, you know, even though there's still a lot of rappers that are.
What would it take for an artist in this region? We have several. Yeah, there's several artists. They're not necessarily African American who've gotten popular, and have taken off on an underground level. But what would it take? Because you know, it's New Mexico. We don't have a very large African American influence or population. But when it comes to hip hop music, we have a large influence in that. What would it take to not only shine a little bit more of a spotlight here on New Mexico as far as hip hop, but also for African Americans to really step up in that realm?
Good one.
I know, we don't have a lot of time left. I know, I just put a doozy on y'all.
Deep thought.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I look at hip hop like this. So I think hip hop is a lot like wine, right? You either like it or you don't. Then if you like wine, you might just drink anything that's wine. Or you might become a connoisseur, or you might become a sommelier, or you might become an enologist and actually make the wine, right? So there's different levels of involvement here. I think in New Mexico, we have a lot of people who like wine and a lot of people who don't like wine, a lot of people who like hip hop and a lot of people who don't. And so there's not enough critical mass, I think, of Black people to validate, you know what I mean, one another and edify, amplify, and support one another to create like this critical mass that's needed to launch an artist from a small market. I saw that happen in Denver. Say, for instance, an artist like Trev Rich out of Denver who you know, was one of hundreds of MCs who was working and working and working, trying to get up and out of the city. But it took that many MCs to do that much work for that length of time for one to make it to be able to sign, you know, with a major label. So in New Mexico, while I don't think it has to be Black people, but the challenge is if it's indigenous people, if it's Chicano, Latino, Hispanic people, they have to sell their communities on Lycan hip hop.
Gotcha.
That's it.
And that makes it more difficult for them because they're kind of pioneers in their involvement in the art form anyway, which is unfortunate because, you know, they're dope. They're amazing MCs and lyricists that are out there. There's also like, if you don't have anybody to kind of check your skill set, you know, then
Competition,
the competition piece is definitely necessary. Like competition is what birthed hip hop,
Right.
is to have that. And so if you don't have anybody to spar with, it does make it difficult to like, you know, sharpen your skills.
I think sometimes the community is selfish too. They're concentrating more on themselves and not thinking about outside the box, which causes a major conflict because people see that and then they become the same way because you're not sharing or you're not helping. I'm not gonna help you. I'm not gonna share with you. I'll just keep my stuff to myself and I'll do it by myself.
Yeah.
And that causes the issue. That's the major issue there. No one's gonna win when you're trying to be doing it alone. When you're just doing it by yourself, you can't come up. It's impossible. So community working together would probably be ideal.
That's
just
the
like
best
you
way
said,
to
I
do
agree
it.
with you.
Wow, we could sit here all day to do it. We've got no more time left. I want to thank you all for being here with me to
Thank
talk
you.
about this. Hopefully we can have many more discussions about hip hop and where it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.